Welcome to the Data Literacy Show, the podcast that helps organizations build, measure, and level up their data and AI literacy.
Yes, welcome. I'm Ben Jones, co-founder and CEO of Data Literacy, where we are all about helping people learn the language of data and AI through tailored training and assessments.
Yes, and I am Alli Torban. I'm the Senior Data Literacy Advocate here at Data Literacy. And on today's show, we are celebrating National AI Literacy Day.
Hey.
Wow.
All right. What do you know?
So March 28th, 2025 is National AI Literacy Day. And we're coming together to talk about what is AI, how it's shaping our world. And I thought it would be great to dedicate an episode giving some basic definitions of artificial intelligence and how we actually might be using AI already without even knowing it. So we can collectively increase our AI literacy today, here, right now.
Right here and now. I love it. Okay. Yes, this technology, AI, it's an umbrella term. There are so many types of algorithms and applications under this term, but it's not going away. And like you said, Alli, most of us are already using it. We've been using it in a lot of ways for actually quite some time, and we may not be aware of that. And so actually it's on the rise too, though. So according to LinkedIn's Skills on the Rise report, this is an inaugural report they put out this year, just actually a week or so ago. AI literacy has been named the #1 fastest growing skill in the United States for 2025.
Wow.
And so it's important to have a basic understanding of what it is. And so we need to understand what some examples of AI in use are right now, but let's also maybe tackle some of those common myths and misconceptions.
Right. And it is kind of hard to just get one definition, one final be all end all definition of what is artificial intelligence. So
Yeah.
before I helped you build our AI literacy fundamentals course,
Yeah.
I probably would have defined AI as intelligent machines like those robots you see in the movies that can interact with you. They're talking to you, maybe they're making you breakfast. So that's not typically what we're talking about when we're talking about AI right now. So what do you think it actually is, Ben?
Yeah, you're right. There are so many examples in pop culture, especially as a child of the 80s and 90s, where, whether it's Data on Star Trek or Johnny Five, these examples of robots, some of them more friendly than others. But we're going to see robotics coming out. We're going to see those types of applications here real soon. They exist already. They're not as common as a lot of other types and forms of AI. But if we just start for a moment to say, let's just kind of try to pin it down, can we actually define it? Well, it's interesting to go back to the very, very beginning of the formal field of AI, let's say, in the 1950s. So there was a professor, John McCarthy, at Stanford. At the time, he was, I believe, in Dartmouth, but he applied for and submitted an application for a conference to take place in 1956. So in 1955, which is when he applied for the support and the funding for this Dartmouth workshop, which it's become known as, he laid out a definition. He said it's the science and engineering of making intelligent machines, especially intelligent computer programs. So I think going back to the person we call the father of AI for an early definition is probably good. And I think that this definition is still really useful. It still really holds. Of course, it begs the question, what does the word intelligent mean at all? So we can look at other definitions as well. The dictionary itself, Oxford English Dictionary, is calling it the capacity of computers or other machines to exhibit or simulate intelligent behavior. Okay. So not intelligent machines anymore, but rather intelligent behavior. I think that's an important distinction because whether they themselves have intelligence the way human beings have intelligence is, I think, probably open for debate, but most likely they do not. I mean, we're not talking about them having consciousness or sentience. I think that that's a common myth. We like to think about that, but really it's about them taking on tasks or doing jobs that would otherwise require some sort of intelligent human activity, right? And then they're also now having that kind of agency, even maybe without having what we would define as human intelligence. So it gets into semantics a bit there, and I think that that's often the case where some of the confusion can arise. But we can even look at other examples of definitions of AI, whether that's from, the US government or EU. But I think, what we need to really settle with is just that, these are agents. They are having some agency, let's say. They're having some ability to take action in the world. And whether we, like that or not, whether it's helpful or not is another matter. But they're taking actions and they're doing things based on patterns they've discovered in data. And when I say discovered, it's not really the same as when a human discovers something. I think that's important to
Mm.
differentiate. We tend to, like those 80s and 90s TV shows and before, we call it anthropomorphizing these machines where we start to imbue them with human-like qualities.
Mm.
The bottom line is they're doing things, they're doing jobs for us, in some cases to help us. And those jobs are being done based on these algorithms that we've created, right? That have been able to follow specific rules or discover certain patterns in the data and then apply those patterns to get a job done.
Yeah, and it is interesting how they use the word intelligence or intelligent in these definitions, and then it makes you think, what does it actually mean for a machine to be intelligent? And it made me think about in the course, in our AI literacy fundamentals course, you taught me the AI effect or the AI paradox, where we think a task requires intelligence until we teach a computer to do it, and then we move the goalposts and we don't think that's an intelligent task anymore.
Yeah, it's constantly changing. It's this moving goalpost, like you said. So,
Hmm.
for example, if you go back to the 1990s, Gary Kasparov, world chess champion, loses to IBM's Deep Blue uh, AI system. And that was the first example, really, of someone at the top of the chess world losing. And at that time, up until then, it had widely been thought in AI circles that chess was a great example of a game that would be like a true test of AI because it requires so much intelligence to play it well. And that was the thinking. And then as soon as Deep Blue beats Kasparov, okay, in the immediate aftermath of that, people were saying that it was this huge major win for AI. But then not long after that, critics started to push back, saying, well, maybe Deep Blue is not really smart. It's just some overpowered calculator that's pointed to some gigantic database of chess moves. So they start to discount it. They start to say, well, maybe it isn't actually artificial intelligence. And that's just one example because it seems like that is kind of always happening, right? Or certainly it has been happening in the first half century or so of the history of the field of AI, this constant moving and shifting of what it means to be AI. And it never quite lands on anything where it stays there. It just keeps chasing itself, really. So
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I can see how it'd be hard to define what is artificial intelligence if we do keep moving the goalposts as
Yeah,
we get used to the technology.
exactly. And I mean, it's definitely the case that since that Deep Blue example in the late 90s, there's been a big shift. So there's been a revolution in the world of AI in the 21st century. We call it the deep learning revolution. And this is where models like a deep neural network that has a number of different layers, multiple layers of these artificial neurons connected, and sometimes billions of them together, trained on data. So that is a new focus. They've been around actually since the 60s and 70s in a very primitive form, but with the rise of compute and the scaling of that, as well as all of the massive amounts of data we've been contributing to, each one of us, with every photo we upload and every
Hmm.
social media post and such. Now all of a sudden there's this new opportunity to leverage those kinds of neural networks in new ways, and it has led to a huge revolution in the last couple decades, let's say. And so I think that that's something to take note of, that the complexure of AI is a little bit different now than what it was before 2000. Let's say
Hmm.
before, like 2012 was around the year where we saw a pivot point there, maybe, let's say. But yeah, so it's looking a little different now.
Yeah, it's moving so fast too. So in my
Yep.
mind, I'm thinking a good way of thinking, what is artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
It's basically machines designed and trained to solve problems or perform tasks based on patterns of data. And it gets better over time when the systems have more data to be trained on and we give them feedback too sometimes.
I think it doesn't get a lot better than that, Allie. I mean, I think you nailed it. Of course, maybe it could potentially get worse over time, depending
Mm,
on a few things. But in general, that's the goal and that's the trend, and that's what we've seen. So I think you nailed it. I can't think of a way to improve on that definition from
Yeah,
what you've got there.
it's a good way, a good thing to keep in mind rather than just imagining
Yeah,
robots traveling around your house.
yeah,
It's
exactly,
more
exactly.
useful. All right. So, one thing that most people are surprised to learn, including myself, is that we are currently using AI probably daily, multiple times a
Oh yeah.
day, because it's already integrated into so many of our products that we use.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's really everywhere. You know, if you're looking at the captions here on this video, there's a chance it was created by AI, audio or speech to text. So it really is everywhere. Most people, a lot of people anyway, when you talk about AI, they immediately think about ChatGPT, the AI chatbot by OpenAI. It's been out since November 2022. And I can understand that because it's gotten so much press and really a huge degree of adoption in a relatively short amount of time. But ChatGPT is just one very small. It's a powerful one, so I think it's important to notice it. And it led to a lot of change for sure.
Hmm.
But it's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, so another everyday example we can probably all relate to. Let's say you're watching Netflix or Hulu, all of a sudden it makes a recommendation that you watch a certain show. Well, how does it know that? How does it know to make that recommendation for you? And of course, that recommendation is totally different than what your aunt gets recommended, across the country. So
Yeah.
it's using a form of AI called a recommendation system, also maybe a recommender. Sometimes we call it that, and it's trying to predict which shows you're likely to want to watch and enjoy, so they can keep you in the platform, keep you watching their content. And so they're training these systems on data from all of their users, like maybe the viewing history and whether they rated it, and maybe lots of other demographic variables as well that are about the different viewers of their platform. So recommendation systems, same thing on Amazon. Hey, you like this book, maybe you like that book. That's also another example that we run into, pretty much every week, if not every day.
Yeah. And speaking of moving the goalpost, if you had told me, oh, yeah, that's AI, I'd be like, well, I mean, why wouldn't it figure out what I like? I mean, we've had this for so long, getting recommended different shows. Like I've showed you what I've liked to watch. Of course, you would
Right.
recommend to me similar shows.
Exactly. Yeah. And you imagine it being from their point of view, then what are they going to do? They have millions and millions of users. How can they write some rules-based program? Oh, if they like this program, this show, automatically recommend that show. That would
Hmm.
be, I mean, there's so many shows. They have this massive library, right? So, and a massive user base. So that's what we call sparse data, where every user only watches a tiny percentage of the overall library. So, actually, from a data point of view, it's very challenging to write some rules based program that says, okay, if they like this, then recommend them that. So, that's why AI is useful because they can just train it on the actual viewing patterns themselves to, create these recommendations.
Yeah, and
So,
the
yeah.
more I give it feedback saying, yes, I like that, no, I didn't like that, then it'll start to learn and give me better recommendations.
Yeah, and it's the network effect too. Not only the more you do that, but the more everyone does that,
Right.
it will continue to give you better recommendations. Even if you don't do that, it'll still improve because it's based on more data, more connections between users and their content. So,
Right. And another AI system I interact with a lot is Siri, or if you have an Alexa.
yeah.
I use Siri on my phone a lot, asking her to set a timer for me or to tell me what the weather's like in the morning. And this AI system, it's using voice to text, speech recognition, as well as natural language processing, also called NLP algorithms, in order to interact with me in this really natural way.
Yeah, and if you think about that, that's a big challenge. What about accents? What about,
Hmm.
word choice? What about all these different ways? Maybe how loud you're saying it, and if there's background noise and
Right.
all those sorts of things. It's actually, an example of a usage of AI that's made massive strides in our lifetime. And maybe in the early days, you remember if you used an earlier version of Siri or Alexa, it would often misunderstand your question, and it still does to some degree. Um, but it's certainly improved quite a lot with some of the newer models and approaches.
Hmm.
But so another thing that's thankfully improved a lot is email spam filtering. So
Hmm.
it could always get better. This is a little bit of a race, but you're going to log into Gmail or Yahoo or whatever. Now your email platform, it is using a spam filter. So this is also using these artificial neural networks as well as multiple layers of other kinds of technologies. But these neural networks are learning what kinds of words and phrases are commonly showing up in known spam emails that they're trained on. But again, this is this cat versus mouse race because the people making the spam, they're constantly adjusting, changing their approaches, changing the words they're using. And so then these spam filters need to continually be updated, right? To kind of stay in front of it a little bit. Same is true of credit card fraud. We've all gotten that text or phone call from our bank saying, "Did you make this transaction?" And so it's noticing something different about that particular transaction it's being flagged. And it's AI again that is suggesting those flags. It isn't someone watching the transactions. It isn't some rules-based approach that say if you do this, then do that. There are
Hmm.
some rules-based components to these like multiple layered systems, but a lot of it is AI, kind of learning what patterns are likely to be associated with a spam email or a fraudulent credit card transaction. So we all benefit from that.
Yeah, that's for sure. And another AI system similar to the banking example is when we're depositing checks on our phone. So our phones are using optical character recognition or OCR when we take a picture of a check to deposit it into our bank account. So that's an easy example that we're probably all using all the time.
Yeah, and it sounds so simple because it is such an everyday thing. And again, this
Hmm.
is that
I'm
AI
taking a picture.
paradox. Yeah, I know, right? Of course, they should know the number, but maybe the check is the number's in a different place, or
Mm.
maybe it's a blue pen or a black pen, or the way you write the letters is different than the way I do. So now the systems are getting to the point where they can become pretty accurate, at recognizing what we've written. And when we were kids, you and I, anyway, in the 80s, that wasn't the case. I mean, those systems would really struggle with a task like that, And so again, it was considered this like true test of AI. And now it's just seemed like it's obvious that it should do that.
Hmm.
Another example, of course, we're all, kind of probably using some kind of facial recognition. Like, let's say if you use an iPhone like I do, it has a Face ID feature. What I love about it is it's actually located on the phone itself, not in the cloud or what have you, which is great because it's all about, privacy and security. But what is it doing? It's using the camera, the front-facing camera on your phone, and placing tiny invisible infrared dots on your face, getting a 3D image of your face, and then using that technology right there on the phone itself to try to identify if it's the correct face or not. And so, again, it's a very useful kind of application. Most of us have gotten used to it and just assume that it's a normal thing that a product like a phone could do. But it wasn't long ago that was breakthrough.
Hmm.
So, we're of course seeing that's just everyday usage. We could also talk about the way companies are leveraging AI in really breakthrough ways right now, ever since, again, this deep learning revolution. And then, of course, the large language models like ChatGPT that came out a few years ago. And now we're seeing companies um, drive breakthroughs with AI, drug discovery, early discovery of diseases, even autonomous vehicles and what they're doing on the road now, continuing to increase in capabilities. And I think that that's something that we're just going to continue to see here in the next few years.
Yeah, it's really amazing how far we have come and the just thinking about the potential of all of these systems on our daily lives in the future. It's going to be really interesting, and I'm very
Yeah,
excited to see.
Yeah, because I agree, and it's in some ways exciting, and it's other ways it's a little scary,
Hmm.
because maybe the guardrails aren't in place yet, and maybe they're not quite accurate enough, or maybe there are lots of other problems we'll talk about in a moment. But I think it's exciting. I think it's frightening. I think the game then is to stay involved and educated and as AI literate as we possibly can be, so we can be part of that conversation.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good transition. Let's talk a little bit about some AI myths and
Yeah, yeah,
misconceptions. So AI is really seeped into our world already. We've
yeah,
talked about, and it's got come. There's some really interesting places that it's going.
yeah.
But let's talk about a myth or a misconception someone might have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's common. Okay, one of the most common ones, maybe, it's actually been talked about a lot. So people should hopefully not have this myth, but I still think they do. And that is that they're somehow objective, or unbiased because they're computers and because they're based on data. So therefore, they must be reliable and objective. But that's not the case at all. Of course, the data itself is collected from a world with all kinds of biases and errors and inaccuracies. And, that can be perpetuated by the AI system. That can even be amplified by it. I just saw a post today about how one of the chat bots continued to reference a cancer tumor detection paper that had been retracted. So the paper itself had been retracted, but the AI still thought and
Yeah,
still
it was
referenced it,
trained on
right?
it already.
Exactly. So
Mm,
exactly. So then it didn't know, it wasn't able to adjust quickly enough
mm.
to remove it from its weights. Really, that's the problem, is that it's in these weights of these parameters that's tough to these neurons, these artificial neurons. You can't just go and say, "Oh, remove it," and then it's done. It's like it's been trained on it. It's part of its training data set. So again, it's only one small example of all the
Hmm.
ways that bias and unfairness can be propagated with AI. It's a big concern. And of course, well, another concern is that it's been trained on copyrighted content. This article just came out in The Atlantic recently, allowing people to search a corpus called LibGen, which is a massive amount of pirated books that were pulled together and compiled. Meta used that to train its Llama family of LLM models. And even like the AI literacy fundamentals book that's in the course is part of this massive corpus, along with millions and millions of others. I mean, it's just a drop in the ocean there. But those books are copyrighted, most of them, many of them, and there was no attribution, there was no credit, there was no permission, there was certainly no compensation. So that's a big question right now. To what degree is this content that's copyrighted, that's also been used to train the models, to what degree is that an example of fair use versus unfair use? It's being fought out in the courts right now. And of course, many people have strong opinions about that one way or another. But that's something to call in attention to, I think. And it's something we're going to see some more discussion about that here coming down the road.
Yeah, and that's your examples about books, but also if you think about
Yeah,
art,
exactly. Yeah.
people's artwork, their unique styles, their skill has trained some of these models. And then I can
Right.
say, make me an image of X, Y, and Z in the
Yeah.
style of this person. And, if it's Picasso, who really cares because he's long gone. But someone
And
who
it's in the
is like
public domain.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Maybe
people who
his
are
art's in the public domain.
yeah, people making money on their work right now, and I can just emulate them with no
Yeah.
problem, with no skill in their personal style. That's another aspect where it makes people really mad. It makes me mad. I'm
Yeah, and
concerned.
I think it's a legitimate beef that people have, because
Yeah.
especially because in a lot of cases those uses are being used to compete against the very
Yes.
people
Hmm.
whose content was used to train
Hmm.
that tool. So it seems to be on some conceptual level, or at least on an emotional level, let's say, an example of what intellectual property was designed to protect the original creator from that exact scenario.
Right.
But again, we'll see where it all goes. I mean, what's different is that the capabilities of these generative AI applications like ChatGPT, like Midjourney for art, a lot of the video production kinds of models now that are being integrated into these, types of systems with multiple capabilities, like say Google's Gemini. Those are, I think, questions that are ones we're going to need to solve pretty quickly here, because those capabilities are amazing. They're not always great. Sometimes I don't love them. Sometimes they can be turnoffs for me. I see an image and I can tell it's generated by AI and I don't love it. But in any case, yeah, I think that the capabilities are something we've never seen before. But again, is it fair? Was it fair that those copyrighted content has been used in that way to train it? I think
Yeah.
that's a question we're going to have to answer.
Yeah, a really important question for a lot
Yeah.
of people. And another important myth is that AI can be trusted to make important decisions autonomously. When in reality, AI systems, they're really just statistical predictions, not reasoned judgments. So they really do require some kind of human oversight, especially for those big decisions affecting people's lives. And these systems can hallucinate and give you incorrect information, and not everybody's taking such a critical eye to the outputs that AI systems are giving them.
Yeah, we need to question everything it gives us. And, that's something we need to talk about, that it's something that is super important, that people are critically evaluating the outputs of AI systems. And so the last myth we'll share is that you need some kind of super advanced technical skills to work with AI, when in reality, you do need some technical expertise to develop AI, that's for sure. And there's some very brilliant minds at work on that. But working effectively with AI as say, a user of an AI system, that requires AI literacy rather than, a PhD or programming skills or something like that. So it's useful to understand these general capabilities, really important to understand their limitations. And also, we have to get to a place where we can decide for ourselves what is an appropriate use case versus what is inappropriate.
Right, right. We have just scratched the surface of
Yeah.
what is AI in this episode. So let's do a quick recap. We talked a little
Okay.
bit about some basic definitions of AI, and that we have a tendency to move the goalpost when we're talking about what is intelligence. And we use AI daily in things like Netflix, Siri, Apple's Face ID. We are going to very amazing places with deep learning revolution. And there's also a lot of myths and misconceptions out there, like AI is unbiased. It can make decisions autonomously, or you need a lot of technical skills to work with AI. Those are all myths. And I hope that this small bit of AI literacy was a good primer for you, for our listener, to join the conversation about AI, especially on National AI Literacy Day.
That's right. That's right. So appropriate, right? So, and of course, if you want to learn more, we have a series of courses actually that you or your team can take. There's AI Literacy Fundamentals and the book that goes along with that. The next course is Harnessing Generative AI. The third course is a really important one called Advancing Responsible AI. And so, these are ways you can really dive in, and we're willing to work with you all, if your organization, let's say, to customize these courses to really fit and be tailored to your own use cases. So that's what we're all about.
Yeah, and Ben really explains these concepts in a very easy to understand way. You don't have to be a technical genius to understand these. They're broken down really nicely. I created a bunch of diagrams to help support your learning, so you can read about it, you can see in diagram form, and you can go to dataliteracy.com and you can go to the training tab. You can see all these courses and more. So thanks for tuning in to the Data Literacy Show. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone who's also working on improving data and AI literacy in their organization.
That's right. And hey, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode or anyone after that. And everything we mentioned today, you can find right there in the show notes at dataliteracy.com.
All right. See you next time.
See you next time, everyone. Bye-bye.